Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. Hello crafters and welcome to my channel Blonde Cards and Crafts. Today we're going to do some crafting and I'm going to use the Papercraft Society box. This is box number 23 and this is the latest box. It's the August 2021 box. So I'm going to use some of the products from this box as well as some from my stash, and we're going to make 3 cards. The first card we're going to make will be this. Now I need some sympathy cards in my stash, so this is a sympathy card that I'm making. I'm using some papers and some dies from the stamp to make this card, and then inside our card will look like this. So this is our first card. Our second card then is this one. It's a fun fold card. It's a pop-up panel card as well as a Z-fold card. So our card, when it opens like this. Isn't that so unusual? I just love it. And it closes up really nicely and opens really nicely. And it can sit on the shelf like so, or you can have it like so, however you want to display it. But this will be card number 2, and that's our pop-up panel Z-fold card. And then finally card number 3, we'll make this one. Now in our box we get some lovely pink ink, and what I did was some ink smushing. You can see it here. I'm going to stamp as well as die cut out a sentiment, and this is how the inside of our card looks. So those are the 3 cards we're going to make today. If you have the box, I hope you'll craft along with me. If not, you might use some of the products that you have in your stash. But if you like, you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. So for our first card, we're going to need a card base. That's a 5x7 card base. And I have a piece of 10x7 card here, and I've scored it at 5. Onto that then I'm going to put this orange card, and it measures 6 by 4¼ and you can see here that the card is going to be in the landscape position, and that orange card came in the kit. This gold card I have taken from my stash and I've used the dies. These are the dies that came in the kit, and this is how I like to store them. So I'm using the largest square die for this piece, and then the little next size in, the skinny die, I've used for my pattern paper. Now my die cut piece in gold measures 5¾ by 4⅛, and my die cut pattern paper measures 5�3² by 3¾ So if you're cutting these and using papers that you have in your craft room, they're the sizes you'll need. These are the 2 stamp sets that came in the box as well, and I have them put into sleeves here for storing in my craft room. I'll also be using this stamp set as well, and it's a Crafter's Companion Sympathy craft card stamp set. So what I'll do is link to products down below, so keep an eye out down in the description for them. I'm going to use the with Sympathy across the top of my card, and I'll use one of the sentiments for inside my card. So I'm going to speed everything up now, and I'm going to glue down my pattern paper to my gold frame, and I'm going to use my Cosmic Shimmer glue to do that. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it into my mini Misty. I want to stamp my with Sympathy sentiment on this, and I want to be sure that I get a good stamping because I don't want to make a mess of it and have to throw this out. So I'll use the mini Misty and I'll get a perfect stamping. I'll use my VersaFine Onyx black ink to stamp that down. That's the great thing about the Misty or any stamping platform. When you're stamping down a sentiment, you can always go back and do a double stamping if you need to. So now I'm going to glue this down using my Cosmic Shimmer glue to the orange card, and this, as I said, came in the kit. And then I'm going to stick that down onto the card base, and to do that I'm going to use some foam tape, and this is just cheap foam tape that I got on the internet, and it works a treat. So I'm going to take the release paper or the backing off the foam tape, and then I can place that down onto our card base. And I know this card is really simple, but you know what? I think for a sympathy card, we don't need any extra bells or whistles. Well, that's how I kind of feel. And I like the look on this pattern paper. It's got a very relaxed or chilled feeling to it. And I think that's what we'd like to express when we're giving a sympathy card. So I've stamped my lovely sentiment inside, and it says, "Loved ones leave the world, but never leave our hearts." I'll stamp the 3 image with the birds inside later on. And now we're moving to card number 2. For this card, we need 2 card bases, and these are both 5 by 7. To make one yourself, you'll need a piece of card, and that measures 10 by 7, and I've scored it at 5. So one of these we will keep as a 5 by 7 card base. The other one, we're going to need an extra score line on it to make it a Z-fold card. So as I said, I have my first score line there at 5, and then the next one will be at 7.5, and that will be our score line to give us our Z-fold card base. So then all we need to do is burnish those score lines. So I'm going to do that by folding my card in half and then folding back on that second score line. So we have a mountain fold and a valley fold. So the mountain fold is there for the Z fold, and then the valley fold is for the middle part. So our Z fold card is going to fit inside our regular card base. Now you can see it overhangs just a little bit there. So what I'm going to do is trim off literally 1/16, just a smidge off that edge, and then you will find that sits in perfectly into our 5 by 7 card base. Here I have a piece of pattern paper, and it measures 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and I'm going to put that down onto our card front. I'm going to stick that down, and then I'm going to use a die to cut out our panel. Now when I glue this down, I'm only going to glue around the edge. I'm not going to glue the center of it, and I'll show you that in a minute. So I also have 2 more strips. These 2 measure 2 1/4 by 6 3/4, and each one will go here and here, and that'll embellish that side of our card. I'm also going to add a strip to the middle, which will be 3/4 of an inch by 6 3/4, but I'll mention that again once we get to it. So these are the dies that I'm using. They're the Card Making Magic dies by Christina, and I'm going to take this one here, and it's the 7th die out, I think it is. I'm going to use that one to die cut out my opening, and then the next size down I will use to die cut my white piece. So I'm using the Collal Glue here, and the Collal Glue, when this dries, it dries really strong and solid. Now I'm marking the outside of my die on the back of my paper, and this will just give me an idea of where to put the glue, because I don't want to glue the whole thing down. I want that when I die cut out the front of this card, that my pattern paper and the card base piece will be separate. So here I have the white piece from the card base and the brown piece from our pattern paper. Lovely. Okay, so our pattern paper fits back into that little gap, and our white piece I've die cut with the next die down to make it a little smaller. You can see that just there. So this is how this will look. They'll sit in there perfectly. Okay, now with our strips, I'm going to add them onto the Z-fold part. Now you can add these on, or you can leave them plain. It's up to yourself. And there's that little strip I was talking about. This piece is 3/4 of an inch by 6 3/4. So the next thing we need to do now is just stick everything together. So I'm going to use my Collal Glue to stick my Z-fold card base to my standard card base. And I'm going to make sure and butt it up right up against the score line, as well as make sure that it's the same in height. So I'm just making sure it's sitting in there perfectly. And that's the great thing about the Collal glue, gives you a little bit of wiggle room. Next, I'm going to glue down my 2 pattern paper panels. That's a mouthful. Try saying that 3 times really fast. So there's one, and then the second one. Lovely. And you could embellish these 2 panels by just stamping on them, or embossing them. You could emboss. We got an embossing folder in the box. You could emboss the 2 strips and put that down, but I just love the continuity of using the pattern paper. And this little piece, it was an offcut, and I thought that would fit nicely in there. It's hidden behind the frame when the card is closed, but when you open it, it helps to embellish where we're going to put our sentiment. So now we need to add this panel, and we're only going to stick this down to the right hand side on the Z-fold part. So you can see there, I'm being very careful where I'm putting my liquid glue. I'm going to make sure that sits in the opening perfectly, how it was die cut out. And then once I've that done, I can add my white panel on top. But before I do that, I want to make sure and stamp this. Now I've die cut out a sentiment for someone special, and again I use the die that came in the kit. I'm going to put that up at the top like so, and then I'm going to take this image here of the tree. There's some lovely images to choose from, but I've gone with this one and the one of it looks like reeds in the water's edge. So I'm using my Papercraft Society brown ink, and I got this in a previous kit. Unfortunately, you can't buy these. You can only get them when you're a subscriber to the kit. But I do love the Papercraft Society ink. It goes on really, really well. And it's water reactive too, which is really cool. Okay, so I'm going to stamp my tree image over to the left-hand side. And I love the way the 3 little birds are either flying into the tree or flying out of the tree. So now with my sentiment glued down onto that, I can now attach this to our pattern paper panel. And to do that, you can see I'm using some foam tape. Again, I just like a little bit of dimension on this. When the card is closed, it'll sit just up above our pattern paper panel that it's going on. I'm so chuffed I'm able to say pattern paper panel without it up. Anyway, I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue on my foam. That way I'll have a little bit of wiggle room when I'm placing this down, because I want to make sure it's on there straight. Now I'm going to embellish the inside of the card. I'm going to take the water and reeds stamp, and then I'm also going to take a sentiment from my Sympathy stamp set that I'm using from my stash, and it just says, "We're sorry for your loss." And I like that. Sometimes something simple, you know, it just does it. These are cards I hate to make, and I have one Sympathy card left in my stash, but I really felt I needed to add some more. Here we go. There is our pop-up panel Z-fold card. And now we're going to move on to card number 3. In the kit we got some ink, this little bottle of ink here. It's a beautiful pink color, and the bottle has a dropper on it, and I thought I would use some watercolor card and do some ink smushing. So I have my Strathmore Bristol Smooth card that I'm going to use, and I have this piece here, and it's cut down to a 4x6 piece. I also have a card base, and this again is 10x7 scored at 5, and that'll give us a 5x7 card base. And then I have this pink card. This came in the kit, and this piece measures 4 7/8 by 6 7/8. I just wanted a peek of the white card base all around that pink. So I'm going to layer the 3 up like so, but before we do that, we need to do some ink smushing on our watercolor card. Now I have taken an A3 size piece of card. This is a hammered cardstock, and I have put it into a laminating pouch. I've also printed up my Blonde Cards and Crafts logo, and I've put that inside the laminated pouch as well, and I've put it through because I love laminating a white sheet of cardstock to use for ink smushing or ink blending. It just helps to keep my mat nice and clean. So with my ink, I've given it a little shake earlier. I'm going to drop out 2 little drops, more or less. There we go. Just 2 little drops is all we need. And I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm going to spray those. So I'll give a couple of sprays. There we go. That's the water coming out now. And then we're literally going to lie our piece of cardstock down on top of it. Lovely. Now, this can be quite an intimidating thing to do because you'll see people and you think, oh my gosh, they make it look so easy. And it really is. I go in with no intentions whatsoever. I just stamp down the card onto the ink, wipe up any little extra with a piece of kitchen roll. I've come in then with my heat gun. So I'm just going to dry off my cardstock, and then I'm going to go back in again. And every time you dry off your cardstock and go back in again, you get layers. So you get darker layers and it's lighter and lighter where you miss. And I love this effect. I like to take an embossing pen and go around the lines, or, you know, I love to make it look kind of like a marble effect. So with an embossing pen, if you go along and then put embossing powder onto it, it just gives these beautiful gold veins. And I did debate doing it with this, but I thought, no, I'm going to keep it strictly, you know, using the ink and just the cardstock so you can see how well it looks. But I love it. I love all the layers. And I'm pretty much happy with this now, how it's turning out. I'm using my heat gun to dry the back of the cardstock as well as the front. Now I'm taking a piece of regular white cardstock that I use for stamping and card base making. This is 300 GSM and it's just a smooth white cardstock. And you can see here, you can use that to do your ink smushing with as well. It doesn't have to be watercolor card. Now I've only gone into this a couple of times using the leftover ink that's on my mat, and it gives a subtle look to this. But if I had put a few more drops down, sprayed some more of the water and gone in, I could have gotten darker colors. But I just hate to wipe up the leftover ink that was on the mat without using it. So now I have a second little card base that I have there ready to go on a card. And then to wipe it up, because our ink is water reactive, all you need to do is give your mat a spray with some water and clean it up, and it's perfect. So I'm just rolling the cardstock there to straighten it out a little bit and then spraying some water into my hand. I'm just dropping down water droplets onto the 2 cards. And then I'm giving them a minute. You don't see it because I have this video sped up, but I'm giving them a minute and then I dab off the excess water with my piece of kitchen roll. So now my cardstock, my watercolor cardstock is dry, and I'm now going to ink up using some of the stamps we got in the kit. And because I'm putting these down as just a black stamping, you can also take a fine liner black pen and you can add to your stems or you can make them longer, and that's what I've done here. I'm going to clean off the stamp and then move my cardstock and then replace the stamp down and then give another stamp. Now this is what we call first generation stamping. When you ink your stamp, stamp it on your paper. But there is a residue of ink left on your stamp. Now if you stamp using your second residue, it gives a lighter stamping, and they call that a second generation stamping. So I have put ink on my stamp, I've stamped it off on a piece of cardstock, and then I'm stamping down on my watercolor card. You can see me do it again. I put some ink on the stamp, stamp it on some white paper and then stamp it down onto my watercolor cardstock. So we have first generation inking and second generation inking. So we have the lighter color behind our darker black. So that is the front of my panel done. All I need to do now is stick that down onto our card. To do that, I'm going to use some double-sided tape. I want to make sure when this goes down, it stays nice and flat. You could also use foam tape to flatten that down. Sometimes you can put your watercolor card under, we'll say, a couple of heavy books, leave it overnight, and that'll flatten it out. But I find using the double-sided tape works fine. So I've stuck down my pink matte layer. I'll peel off the release paper on my tape, and then I will center that on my panel, press down in the middle, and then pull out the release paper on the sides. Lovely. And I'm delighted with that. And you can see there, it lays really flat. The tape does help. Now I die cut out the For Someone special in some black cardstock, and I'm going to glue that down to my card front. In the background here, there are a load of crows in the field behind the house. The farmer has gone cutting grass for silage, so there is a murmuration of crows out over the field, and they're dipping down to feed. So I do apologize if you can hear that in the background. So now I have my sentiment down. I'm going to take my fine liner pen and I'm just going to put down some little dots around. This is the same as doing ink splattering, but it's more controlled. I like to kind of be in control of that part. Okay, so inside I'm going to embellish the card. I'm stamping with some black ink, and I'm also going to stamp using some ink from my stash. This is the Harmony Water Reactive die, and it's called Plum Jam. You can see there I stamped once and then a second time, so I got second generation stamping as well. And I love that just down there in the bottom of the card. I'm going to put a sentiment inside the card, and this sentiment says, "Sending heartfelt sympathy." And that's it. That is card number 3 all done. So here's the 3 cards that we've made using mostly products from our Papercraft Society box number 23. I hope you've enjoyed my video. If you have, you might consider clicking on the thumbs up button down below and giving my video a like. If you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing, and if not, you might consider clicking on the bell icon down below so you'll become a subscriber and be notified each time I post a new video. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's it, guys. I'm going to leave you with some images of the cards we've made. Until next time, stay safe and bye for now.